So today our speaker is Greg Schott from Youth Villages. And Greg was born in Chicago and moved to Knoxville, Tennessee in 1980. He graduated from the University of Tennessee in 1989 with a bachelor's degree in psychology. Shortly thereafter, he moved to Nashville and has lived there ever since. He has been married to his wife, Michelle, for 32 years, and they have 2 children, Jennifer, who also graduated from UT, and Matthew, who graduated from ETSU. Now, okay, I mean, that's interesting. So, I got you. Okay. I know it's a rivalry story there. Greg has been in the nonprofit world for over 28 years and is currently the Assistant Director of Development for Youth Villages in Middle Tennessee. He just recently celebrated 18 years with the organization. In 2018, Greg was one of the first recipients of the Gold Kite Award, which is the single highest honor that Youth Villages can bestow on an employee. He has mentored 4 young men in Youth Villages Life Set program and spends much of his free time volunteering for his church and other community organizations. And I will mention that one of the things that I learned about Greg is that he is wearing a Rotary emblem on his lapel because he is a member of the Downtown Nashville Rotary Club. And I don't know how familiar you are with that club, but it's a very large club. And up until recently, they had always met at the Wild Horse Saloon. So on a lunch meeting during the week at the Wild Horse, can you imagine going down there and finding parking and all those things? But once it's sold to Luke Combs, they moved. The Rotary Club now meets at Geodis Park. So another really cool place to have a meeting. But we're very happy to welcome a fellow Rotarian today and to listen to what you have to say, Greg. So thank you very much.
All right, folks, I'm going to move around a lot, so I'm going to see if I can do this right. Is that good enough?
Yep,
good?
That'll work.
That'll work?
That'll work.
Okay. So, get out of that. I want to kind of do my presentation a little bit different. I want to tell you a story about the organization that was never supposed to be, because we aren't supposed to exist. And it's really kind of amazing because currently, well, this past year, we served over 36,000 children in the 15 states that we're in. Predominantly, we're in Tennessee. 8,000 of those kids that we served were in Middle Tennessee. A lot of those kids are here in Rutherford County. And that's why I wanted to come to you, primarily to let you know that what I'm going to talk about today are services that we provide for the community. A lot of people know that there are the kind of kids that we serve out there in the community, that there's agencies doing the good work, but you don't know who that is. Well, I'm here to tell you who that is. But I want to go back to 1982. Our CEO, at the time, he was just a social worker. He had gotten out of college. His name is Pat Waller. He was asked by one of the judges in Memphis, which is where our headquarters is, to come to his chambers. So Pat went there, and the judge said, "Pat, I got this campus. It's called Dogwood." He goes, "I want you to go there and shut it down." He said, it's not doing any benefit for the kids. We're bleeding money. It's a mess. He said, "Just go in there, shut it down, get it over with." So Pat goes, "Well, Judge, let me go take a look at it. Let me go see if there's a chance." He goes, "All right." So he went over there. He came back to the judge, and he said, "I think I can make this work." He goes, "You got 6 months, and you got to show me some kind of results." So 6 months later, he had the results. He came back. Judge was like, "Great." So 2 years after that, in 1984, judge calls him back. Says, "Pat, I got another struggling campus. It's called Memphis Boys Town." Same situation. Kids not doing it, getting any better. They're not changing their behaviors, bleeding money. Got to do something. Pat goes over there, says, "Okay, we can make that work." So we merged the 2 campuses together ultimately in 1986, and we become Youth Villages. We've been that ever since. We moved to Middle Tennessee, in 1997. So we've almost been here 30 years. And in that time, it's really been very interesting to see, and I've been with the organization since 2006. It's very interesting to see how we've grown from just a residential campus. And most people think, when they think of stuff like what we do, they think of the residential facilities that we have, the big campuses. Now, all that stuff still exists, and it exists in Memphis, There is a need for that, but we also found out that there were a need for additional services. So well, I didn't get the slide thingy. Hold on. All right, let's try this again. Let's see. All right. So in 1986, we established these set of values. I'm not going to read them to you. Y'all can read. But I do want to point out one, and that's the very last one, which I hate that it's last because it's the very core principle, I think, of which you should do any kind of business. Just kind of like we have our four-way test, this is our 10 values. And doing what you say you're going to do, if you can't do that, none of the other stuff matters. So, when you look at it, it's all good stuff, but you get to that last one and it really hits home. I remember when I was first going through orientation, they made us memorize this. You had to live it, breathe it, bleed it, and it never left me. Very, very, very good stuff. But anyway, based on those values, we started to realize something with the residential facilities. We were sending the kids back home after getting them on track, and they were boomeranging right back to us. And we were like, wait a minute, we need to change up some things. And you got to remember, in 1986, 1990, mental health wasn't what it is now. We talk about mental health now. We didn't talk about it then at all in the 80s, especially even with children. And so what we realized was, we need to make some kind of change in our program or an addition. So, well, that's just the local impact map. And you can see where we're carved out. The one thing I will say is this line on East Tennessee has extended all the way to Crossville. So we cover now 45 counties, north, south, east, and west. So we go as far as Waverly West, and then east is to Crossville. But we came up with Intercept. So Intercept is an intensive in-home counseling program. And what happens is our staff go out to meet with mom and talk with her and get her on board with a plan to help her child. So when they come out of residential, or maybe before they get pulled out of DCS Department of Children's Services to begin with, we can work with them and make sure they stay with the family because we believe kids are best served if they're with their families. So this is, it's funny, I look at these pictures and I remember when they were taken, we have to use older pictures once the kids age out because of several protection deals. But anyway, all these kids are grown up. They're all adults. I mean, they're like 30 years old. But basically, we're with them 6 to 9 months. It's a great intensive, they meet 3 times a week with the staff to make sure that mom's on board and the youth is on board. This program has an 86% success rate in keeping kids safe at home. And that's what one of the core programs here in Rutherford County. Okay, so we got that program up and rolling, and then we introduced foster care, which I think most everybody here knows about foster care, what it is. I know there are a few probably misleading facts out there, but everybody kind of knows what that is and what that does. Currently in Middle Tennessee, we've got 200 kids in foster care in our program alone. There are 8,000 kids in state custody right now in the foster care system in the state of Tennessee. Where'd my water go? Sorry. All right. So, foster care leads to adoption. It's amazing to see these kids. And you got to understand, these kids come from really rough situations. They've been through serious abuse and neglect to the point of their anger, their behaviors are extreme. Some are very violent. Some are emotionally and just verbally abusive, but they've gone through a lot. So for them to get to a stage like this, where a forever family, they find their forever family, it's amazing. I want to tell you another story. I'm big on stories, guys, I'm sorry. Last year, we had an amazing story. There's a kid, his name's Lance. Lance, I had known Lance almost since the time I started at Youth Villages. He came to us as a young kid, he was like 9 years old, I think, when he first came to us. And I had thought that he had long since left our care. Well, come to find out, he had been in and out of our care for the past, 8 years, 9, 10 years. He was 17 years old last year. He was 1 month away from turning 18. Once you turn 18, you can't be adopted. And Lance had wanted nothing but a family. That's all he ever wanted. It's what most of our kids wanted. And with 1 month left to go, the court finalized his adoption. And he got a gift that most kids at 17 don't get. But it's truly amazing. And what you can learn from this is there is somebody for everybody. Doesn't matter what kid, what their experience is. You know, if you've ever thought about being a foster parent, I encourage you to pursue that road. If you want to learn more, I can tell you about that. It can lead to this. It doesn't always. We have foster parents that's all they do. They just foster and make sure that the kid gets back to where they either need to be in a biological situation or they find another family for adoption. So there's a lot of different paths you can take. These are the group homes. So we have 3 group homes in Nashville. They're small residential, and I'll show you a picture of the homes in a second. They're very small. There's only 8 kids in a home. I love the picture because I had looked at this presentation in a while. The 3 young men that are there, I took that picture. We had that was shortly after we got Dell for the very first time to provide computers for the kids so we could level the playing field. So they had what every other kid had. And this is before computers and laptops became mandatory, which is what it is now. And I was trying to think of how long, that picture's at least 10 years old. So those 3 young men are all about 30 years old now. And then that's a picture of the backyard of the Wallace group home. You can't see that one as well. But they'll stay here and transition just as hopefully a short time, maybe no longer than 6 months. Sometimes we have them a little longer. We don't want them to feel too much at home there because we want them to move on to something better. So these are the homes. Now, like I say, if you drove by them, there's nothing that tells you that they're a group home. They're just regular homes. They were donated back in 2000. All 3 of them were. The most interesting one's the Wallace group home. It was actually a funeral parlor at one time. So yeah, 8 to 10 girls, 13 to 17 in Wallace. The boys we split because once a boy turns to about 16 years old, they turn into men. And you can't have a 16 or 17-year-old break out in a fight against a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. It's going to be pretty ugly. It's ugly anyway, but it can really be ugly. So we split them up. This is like I said, this is a very small portion of what we do. The majority of the things I'm talking about, other things I'm talking about, that's what we focus on. All right. There's one slide that got left out of here. I left it out. I'm sorry. But I do want to go back. So there is a program in 1999. Pat met with one of our huge donors, Clarence Day. And he met with him, and he was telling Clarence all the great things we were doing, all the kids we were helping, all the wonderful services we were providing. And Clarence is like, who are you missing? Who are you not taking care of? And Pat wasn't listening. Pat's super active. His mind's just racing all the time, super active. And he just kept going on and on about our successes. Finally, Clarence just said, Pat, shut up. Listen to what I'm telling you. I want to know, who are you not taking care of? And so finally, Pat said, he had to admit, he goes, all right, our biggest failures, where we're finding is we're letting these kids out at 18, and they got nowhere to go. We're sending them out in a great state, but they got nothing. There's no program for them. And Clarence goes, that's who I want to help. And so we started the LifeSet program. Well, what we called then at Transitional Living, but now we call it LifeSet. And there's 37 youth right now in Rutherford County that are participating in the program. They have no family. They have very few friends. They have no support system other than what we provide. Those young people, a lot of them are at MTSU. There's a couple of them are scholars over there. They're trying to make their way in the world. These kids need our help the greatest. Imagine if you didn't have the guidance and support that you had at that period of time when you turned 18 years old and somebody just cut you loose. I know I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have navigated college. I couldn't have navigated anything. To give these kids a chance, and as Randy mentioned earlier, I mentored 4 of these young men, and I'll talk about them last, 2 of them especially, because to see them grow and see them be successful on their own is the biggest accomplishment that you can ever imagine. To see a young person who otherwise would have never had a chance, to give them that opportunity to mentor somebody, but even if you don't mentor them, just to be aware of the program and know that if you ever see a youth who's in that situation who doesn't have that opportunity, that we exist so you can reach out to us and say, hey, I know somebody. These kids get referred all the time from church groups, from, schools, all kinds of different methods. It used to all come from DCS. Now it comes from anywhere and everywhere, which is great, because when the community knows and shares and finds people and youth like this that need our help, that's what we're here for. So the last thing I just want to mention before I talk about mentoring and all that good stuff is it's just a couple of ways. If you would like to be involved at any time, we cover Rutherford County out of 2 different offices. We actually cover it mostly from Nashville, but we also cover it from Columbia. So depending on where the kids are logistically within the state. But what we decided when I started was that 2 things. We were at back to school time, any kid in our care, and if in the case of Intercept where they have siblings, we would provide backpacks and school supplies for every kid, regardless. And then at Christmas time, we would provide gifts, because 90% or greater of the families we serve are well below the poverty line. They have never had those opportunities typically before. So we wanted to give it to them. The first year we started with Christmas, we did not even 100 kids. This past year we did 2,721 kids. Yeah. The need is there. Backpacks, pretty much a similar story. I love backpacks because the kids get almost as excited about that as they do Christmas gifts. And it's because they're receiving something new. And they want to be like every other kid. There's a couple misleading things about our kids. They think that they want to be known as a foster care kid or a group home kid. They don't. They would rather staff just park down from Glencliff, let them walk up the hill, so they didn't have to see the dreaded red van pull up, and then they get out of it, because then you're targeted as a group home kid. And everybody at Glencliff knows the group home kids, and so they know them at Overton too. And just like that, kids don't want to be known as foster care kids. They don't want to be known as those kids. They just want to be known as a kid. They want to have the same kind of tennis shoes. They want to have the same kind of clothes. They want to have the same kind of backpack, school supply, all that stuff that, all of our kids got. They want it too. They're just kids. They just had a very unfortunate set of circumstances which led them to us. So there's a couple opportunities. And then the third one we kind of introduced was Birthday Heroes. And that's just to celebrate the birthdays of the group home kids. They don't get to celebrate their birthdays because they're typically away. If they do have family, which most of them don't, but if they do, they're not celebrating that time with their family because they're actually trying to do the right thing and shape up their behaviors with us. So we put that out there as well. And then the last one is the Friend in Need program, and it's an email program that I started a long time ago at the request of some volunteers, because we have families who have basic needs, and we still do. Like, for instance, lately it's been diapers. A lot of our young people in the LifeSet program, a lot of the young ladies have had children of their own. And of course, they don't have the resources, and diapers are expensive, folks. I mean, I've been out of the diaper business for about, Matt's 28, so almost 30 years, and to go and see what a package of diapers is nowadays is pretty eye-opening. Formula, the same thing. So a lot of our young ladies, they don't have those things that they need. So a lot of requests have been coming around for baby needs, especially diapers, those kind of things. Our number one request, just so you know, by far and away, beats everything else that we need, twin mattresses, twin beds. You cannot believe, I have 2 pet peeves. One, twin beds. Every kid, there's no reason that a child should have to sleep on the floor. Not in this country. There's no reason. And yet, every week, I'm inundated with at least 2 to 3 requests, many times multiples in the family. I had one at Christmas time, bless you, that had 7 kids sleeping on the floor, and mom was sleeping on the floor. We got them all beds, but I do that through community resources. We access community resources. The people who donate money to us, we channel that money to make sure that we take care of that. My other pet peeve, this is almost as bad, but not quite. No kid should have to carry what they own. If they have to go between foster homes or whatever the case, They should not have to carry it in a trash sack. There is nothing more degrading than putting everything you own in a trash bag. Because what does that make what you have in that trash bag? Trash. Right. The first experience I ever had with this was like 2 months into my job. And there's this young man, I'll never forget, he had 2 huge hefty bags, black hefty bags, full of his clothes. And I was like, what's this about? And the receptionist told me, that's what he carries his stuff in. I'm like, that's ridiculous. So I wound up going to Hartman Luggage way out in Lebanon. They were willing to donate a bunch of luggage. And that's another thing we do is luggage drives from time to time for this very purpose. But and I got him a couple things of luggage. So the next time he showed up in our office, I said, here you go. And he's like, well, what's this for? And I was like, you should have luggage. And he's like, well, thank you. He was like totally blown out of the water. He sat there. So I watched him. He opened up the trash bag. I'll never forget it. His clothes, folks, were folded like you'd go to a department store and see. He had folded everything. He took such good care of his stuff. He didn't just throw it in the sack. And he just like this. And he loaded up those suitcases until he was ready. And he was you'd have thought he'd have won the lottery over a piece of luggage. 2 pieces of luggage, actually. It took 2 or 3 to carry all what he had. And I just said at that point, no, that can't ever happen. So we started that too. We said, part of the Friend and Need thing was, a lot of times groups want to do different things. And that's what I encourage you to do. If you don't do it with us, do it with somebody else. But if you've got an idea like, hey, we want to do, a huge luggage drive for you guys, great, and we'll do that. Or maybe you come up with something else. We're always open to different ideas. A lot of the great things that we have done for the community has been the result of what you guys ask us, can we do X, Y, or Z? But I just wanted to make you all aware that there are kids, like the kids we serve, they're right here in your community. We're here, so if you've got a company or you're part of an organization or whatever, and you want me to come share this information, glad to do it. Anytime, you just let me know. My card, all this information that I've got is right here. But I just take that back to the folks in other community groups, your churches, whatever. Let them know that we're here. If you know people who might be interested in being foster parents, my foster care recruitment team would love for me to pitch them. So it is the biggest challenge we have. Certainly finding, you don't have to be a superhero. You just have to be willing to work with a child that needs love. That's what they need, really, mostly. Last thing I'll do is share a quick mentoring story. Do I have time? That's still good, Randy? All right. So I mentored 4, right? So 2 were short-term, 2 were long-term. Donnie was my favorite. Donnie was the last one I did. And he's great. He is successful on his own. It's funny, I mentored him through Tallwood Group Home. I showed you that earlier. He was at Tallwood. He was at Binkley. Then he was at Tallwood. And then he went into LifeSet. Well, I had him from Tallwood on through LifeSet, so almost 4 years. And we were doing the mentoring program when COVID hit, which was really interesting because Donnie was struggling at the time with graduating high school. And I said, man, you promised me. We had a meeting and we were like, you promised me that you were going to graduate high school. We would do all the fun things, but you had to do this for me. Right after that, COVID hit. Well, he couldn't leave Monroe Harding. So because he had nothing else to do, he got on the computer and he finished high school via the computer and he graduated. And I was like, thank you. Because, and it's funny, we always hear all the bad stories. Well, that's one good story out of COVID. And I was so proud of him. And I remember taking him over to Overton High School for him to get his diploma because you could just drive up and then they'd come and he was Donnie's just a chatterbox anyway. And he got that diploma and he had his phone out taking pictures, and he was sending it to his grandma to let him know that he had done it because his grandma was the only family he had. And so he got through the LifeSet program and he wound up going to TCAT, Tennessee College of Applied Technology. He is now working he's the 3rd shift at an automotive factory up in Ohio. And they make parts for Jeeps and things like that. He still checks in on his grandma. He's up there in Ohio because his grandma's up there. He's looking after her. But he's got his own place. He's got his own job. He doesn't drive. Thank you. He might one of these days. He kept saying he wanted to learn, but then he would never take the. I would say, "I'll take you if you'll study for the test." Never would. But anyway, he was he was my one success. The other success I want to share real quick was John. I had John for 3.5 years before I had Donnie, and John was seriously autistic. He had a lot of challenges. His mind worked very differently, and that's the nicest way I can say it without going into too much detail. But I worked with him, and we kind of, at the end of our relationship, he just disappeared. He ghosted me. He was in Murfreesboro, and I had a job lined up. We were supposed to go. He didn't go for the interview, and all of a sudden he just disappeared. And then nobody heard from him. And I really got worried because putting somebody like that with a lot of disadvantages out in the regular community could be very severe. I was afraid he was going to get killed, to be honest. So 2 years passed by, and I had heard nothing from him. A year ago, 2 years ago, right now, out of nowhere, I got a phone call. And it was Friday afternoon. I'd had a good week. I was going to have a great weekend with my wife. And I look at my phone, and it's John. And I'm like, I can't do this. I just can't. I'm having too good a weekend. I made the mistake of telling my wife that John called. And she obviously knew all about our relationship. She would not let me forget to call him on Monday. I said I was going to call him on Monday. And she would not, the whole weekend. Now remember, you got to have to call John, like I should have just called him, but anyway, so I did. I called him on Monday, and he said, Mr. Gregg, he goes, I want to first say I'm sorry for leaving you, just disappearing on you, for not letting you know where I was, how I was doing. He said, I just had to learn some things on my own. And he went through the whole story about what had happened to him, and he was fine. He now works in Sevierville. He works at the track, which is one of those putt-putt go-kart places that you have. He has a place up the hill. He can't drive either. He has a place up the hill where it's a lease to own. So he uses all of his money that he earns to buy what will be his own little home. He goes, I just wanted to say thank you because you were the reason I did all right. He said, without you, I wouldn't have made it. And so my point with all that, and the reason I like to tell that story is because you just never know. See, I thought I failed John. I thought I screwed it up. He left. I must have done something wrong. So for 2 years, I'd been under the assumption that I failed him. And come to find out, it just took him in his time to figure out what it was. So, there's always that hope for all of our youth. And it was a good reminder. Donnie told me we went to Brothers Burgers. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a burger joint up in Nashville. And it was his favorite place to go. And I had one question I wanted to ask him, and I'll leave you with this. I asked him, I said, Donnie, we've been together for 4 years now. I said, what did you get out of all this? What was the thing? Thinking like he's going to talk about when we went to the Preds game or the Titans game, one of those experiences, right? He goes, you made me a better person. And I sat there going, what? He's like, yeah. He goes, I was a horrible kid when I came to youth villages. I was horrible. He goes, you saw me? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And he's like, he goes, I couldn't be the person I am and have the success that I have now had you all not helped me. He goes, I know that now. I didn't know that then, but I know it now. And so that was the way I kind of sum it up for everybody. It's just like, that's what our job is to make them great people, make them productive members of the community so they can go and do what we do and be successful out there. So that's all I got. If you've got any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Like it drives. We've done,
yes.
Our church has done one for some lady for homeless women.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never done one. Do you take new luggage? Do you want good old luggage? Do you want any kind of luggage?
Okay, that's a great question. So yes on the new, yes on the gently used. And so what does gently used mean? It means you would still use that luggage, but it's just that you've chosen to buy something different. You want a different color or whatever, but the luggage is still very functional. It's not tattered. It's not been beaten up by the airport, that kind of thing. So yeah, because we don't, our kids get a lot of secondhand stuff. And some of it's great. I mean, like worn once, used one. I mean, we've had some luggage I could never tell that it was used. Others, I mean, it looked like it went through we just won't give our kids that kind of stuff because that's not, but yeah, so light, gently used, brand new. Yeah, absolutely. Great question.